The following is an original audio series from Sierra International Machinery, Pile of Scrap, with your host, John Sacco.
Well, welcome to ISRI 2024 in the Booth podcast, not live at the ISRI podcast stand. I'm here with ISRI's favorite economist, Jason Schenker.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
We're going to hit the microphones here.
I know,
All
yeah,
right.
trying not to cause
Before we
trouble.
start, dude, you look amazing.
Thank you so much, John.
How
Very
long's
kind.
this
You do
journey
too.
been going?
Better part of a year. So, yeah, we're not done yet. There's more ahead.
You look fantastic.
Thank
How much
you.
have you
You do
lost?
too.
Thank you. I'm working on it.
Yeah, 84 pounds.
Wait, you really look good, man.
Thank you.
And welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah.
You know, we've done a lot of podcasts, and it's always timely. I think when we do it, there's always seems to be something happening that's affecting our world, our
Always.
economy. And, you know, so let's just start. Let's dive in. The inflation report came out last week?
Yep.
What do we got?
Yeah, that really upends the expectations, right? So there's been a huge debate this year about whether we were going to see a hard landing or a soft landing or a no landing. And the scenario of the no landing now looks much more likely because growth is good, jobs data is good, and now inflation is still too high. Headline CPI accelerated. It's now at 3.5%. Core CPI is 3.8%. For the kids at home, the Fed's target is 2%. 3.5% and 3.8 are not 2. So we're not at the Fed's target yet, which means there's now a chance not only will the Fed not cut rates this year, but maybe if inflationary pressures keep going up on oil prices, gas prices, and everything else that's going on in the world, chance the Fed might need to think about raising rates this year.
Which, that would be a real, I don't know what to think. I don't even know what to say if they raise rates again. I mean, they're trying to slow it down, you know, never leave a heater, but whew.
Well, they're trying to cool inflation because the higher inflation is, the higher interest rates are. And if you can push interest rates up in the short term to get inflation down, then the long-term interest rates are lower. Interest rates are super important if you owe money and you have a revolving debt like the United States. We've got over $34 trillion in debt. We're adding an extra trillion every 100 days, right? We want that interest rate to be as low as possible, which means the Fed really needs to get inflation down to 2%. Otherwise, you have a risk that not only will you pay more interest on all that debt, but then inflation will eventually creep higher and keep going up, and then it's very tough to catch. And with that much debt, now you end up in a really big snowball situation.
So with the U.S. interest rates, what about, okay, you know, you got U.S. growth, U.S. interest rates, or U.S. inflation rate. What about global growth and global inflation as well?
Yeah, so the growth outlook is still pretty good. If we look, IMF World Economic Outlook data out just today as we're sitting here shows global growth 3 years in a row, 2023, 24, 25, it's like give you 3.2%. It's a pretty good number. The U.S. numbers have been revised up for the expectations. U.S. growth is likely to be the fastest growing among advanced economies 3 years in a row as well. So the U.S., and that would be 22, 23, 24. U.S. economy is outpacing the rest of advanced economies. This is still a great place to invest. The U.S. is a great place to do business. The economy is really strong, but one of the costs of a really strong economy is inflation.
All right, we're a strong economy. You know, the JOLTS report, the job openings versus what is it, 8 point what?
Yeah, so the number of open jobs, so we talk about jobs data, there's lots of different jobs data, right? So there's the unemployment rate, which is pretty low at 3.8. There's the JOLTS data, which shows job openings, right? That shows there's about 8.8 million open jobs right now in the U.S. Jobless claims, which is the number of people who are continuing to file unemployment, people actually on unemployment, that's at 1.8 million. So 8.8 million open jobs, 1.8 million people collecting unemployment means there's 7 million more open jobs than people collecting unemployment right now. There's over 400,000, almost 450,000 open jobs in construction. And that's with mortgage rates around 7%. Fed raises rates, it's going to go up higher, but it's unbelievable to think that there's almost 500,000 people in construction, open jobs, with interest rates this high. And manufacturing has over 600,000 open
well,
jobs
as a
right now.
manufacturer, I can tell you, it's been a struggle to find qualified people. We're having to really start our own apprentice program and build our own up, because you can't find what you need off the street. It's just not there.
Unfortunately, I'm not surprised. I hear this from every company. Their number one concern is workforce. Their number one concern is hiring the people they need. There's lots of business to do, but how can you do it if you don't have the people to actually continue to make your company function?
There's a lot of people who've come to America in this new administration and under the last administration. But they're not in the workforce.
That's a very politically correct way to say that, John.
But hold on, here's the thing. They're not in the workforce. We have an election in this country. What are we going to see? Are we going to see them getting into the workforce? If one party went, what do you see here? Let's talk I want to talk about the immigration that we've had.
Yep. So,
everybody could use a worker.
Yep. So this is a very good question. So right now, from a nonpartisan immigration reform standpoint, I don't think you're going to have bipartisan immigration reform until after the election. Right. Like the election has to happen first. There is an appetite on both sides of the aisle to have temporary work visas. There was even a plan put forward by Tony Gonzalez, a Republican in Texas. His district is 2/3 of the border with Mexico and Texas, and he had put forward an A visa plan that had support by Democrats and Republicans. But in the fall of 2023, when all the budget things came up, that just really sucked the air out of the room.
Oh, and then the Republicans decided to kick out their leader.
But there is appetite for this, and if we can get past some of that after the election, I think there will still be bipartisan support for immigration reform. And I know, talking to Business Roundtable, talking to businesses like yours and many others, like, look, we have a mismatch. We have all these people here, and we also have all these open jobs. Wouldn't it be great if we could put people to work somehow? But we also, the folks who came here didn't come here legally, and how do we circle that square? And it's a huge problem. And it's not easily solved, and it will not be solved this year.
Well, look, I don't care what party wins. These people are not going to be shipped back to where they came from.
Probably not.
There's no appetite for it. Because if there was, it would have been done a long time ago. No appetite for it. So, well, that's, again, it's not probably. If we could get these people in the workforce, how does that change? Does it lower the wages? Does it keep will wages then like stabilize and not go up? Will you actually see a decrease in wages, which in inflationary times, you're going to have people struggling to buy bread if they're working for less and inflation is still there.
So if the people are already here, right, they're consuming, right, obviously, right, they're buying food, they're buying other stuff, right? If they became part of the workforce, that probably would result in some wage increase abatement. In other words, wages may continue to go up, but at a slower pace, or it could push wages down or allow them to flatten. I don't think it makes wages go up faster, right? So that's number one. More people who could be having the ability to work here doesn't make wages go up faster. The second thing is, though, that could contribute more positively to GDP, right? Because even if these folks are consuming, but if they're not allowed to work, that doesn't add to growth. Well, if you could find a way to have some folks, right, background checks, you clear, you go through a process, you get them into the workforce pretty quickly, that could be a positive for GDP growth. It could also be positive for tax revenue for payroll taxes.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
And income taxes.
I mean, see, like you mentioned, our debt's going up. $1 trillion every 100 days. Sooner or later, something's got to give, Jason.
That's a lot of money. $1 trillion is a lot of money. And we just keep piling it on. And with high interest rates, the cost to refinance that debt drives the debt up even more.
Look, I'm not smart enough to figure this out, but I know one day you got to pay the piper. And this is not good.
It's not good.
And you know what? Again, here we have an election year. It doesn't matter. National debt's going up. I don't care who wins.
National debt's going up.
Doesn't matter who wins.
That's right.
Again, it doesn't seem to be any appetite for deciding, maybe we've spent
Let's
too
pull
much.
in the debt. No, I don't think there's appetite for that. But I think what you're talking about is something really important. Where we have this addition. I mean, look, U.S. economy is already poised to be the fastest growing advanced economy in the world 3 years running. Imagine if we could tap into untapped labor resources to allow it to grow even faster, right? And at a time we're in such a geopolitical conflict with China and its allies, more growth in this country would be good.
All right, so let's talk about the global conflicts, what's going on. And we still got Russia and Ukraine still going on, 3 years later? We're sitting on a powder keg in the Middle East.
Yep.
If that thing ignites, what's going to happen in the world economies?
Well, I think we're already seeing big ripples. Yeah, we're already seeing really big ripples, right? In my mind, Russia and China got married on February 4th, 2022. At the Olympics, they issued a joint statement and said they defend the outcomes of the Second World War, and there's no limit to their cooperation. Saying they defend the outcomes of the Second World War, totally normal thing to say in the 1900s. Really weird thing to say in 2022. And that they say that is a signal. And just a couple weeks later, Russia invades Ukraine, right? The implication is Russia bigger, China bigger, right? And now you've got Russia and China and Iran and North Korea and Iran's axis of resistance, all these terrorist groups. This is all highly coordinated at this point. The integration between some of the economics, the materiel, the weaponry, supply chains, this is all integrated. What does opening a second front of Cold War II do, right? Like Cold War II starts with Russian wars on Ukraine. Now it's in the Middle East. What does that do? Well, we already see it. It's driving up oil prices, which adds inflation, which makes the dollar go up and makes interest rates a potential risk to the upside, and it creates chaos.
Okay, so in all this chaos, does not China need a strong U.S. economy, void of them being sanctioned in Europe to afford the products they want to make? I mean, can they survive on their own, or does Xi have a problem if the exports start drying up?
Well, the exports already have been falling. Last year, Chinese exports fell below the level of Mexican exports into the U.S. So Mexico is now the number one source of imports in the United States. So China's number two, and right behind China is Canada. This year, it's very likely that number one will be Mexico, number two will be Canada, number three will be China. The U.S. and Chinese supply chains are becoming disentangled. So while China would love to sell more to us, they realize that's going to become more difficult over time. These economies are pulling apart. For industrial metals, stronger dollar, global conflict, higher interest rates, those things for industrial metals, that's not good. You end up with a bigger war, that's going to be really tough. What is good for industrial metals is if you're seeing incentives to have more U.S. and NAFTA-based manufacturing, that's going to result in more metals and industrial demand in the U.S. and Mexico. Yeah.
So the demand will be up. So, okay, speaking of consumption, a lot of new steel capacity coming online here and there, like 15 to 19 million tons. Pick a number. Can the U.S. consume all that steel, or is now we become the export dumpers of steel? Because, I don't know, can we consume it can that much new steel and this much new capacity, something's going to give. That means supply and, a lot of supply of new steel, lower steel prices, maybe a big demand for the recycled iron, so that price goes up, but mills still got to sell their new steel to survive.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a lot more manufacturing in the U.S. and Mexico. I think there will be more demand over time. I think probably the biggest hindrance is the labor market issues we already talked about. There's not enough people working manufacturing as it is. Now we're going to make more steel. We want more stuff made here. There's going to be more government incentives that focus on making more stuff here. You're probably going to have scrap flows change, right? Less being exported, more being domestically consumed.
But there's, talking with George Adams, there's some ridiculously old law on the U.S. books, I forget which one it is, where they can't send a cargo of
the Jones Act.
What is it?
The Jones Act, where you can't move things between ports in the U.S.?
Does that go away in this case?
I don't think so. So the Jones Act limits, so what the Jones Act is it prevents a foreign flagged ship or crude or foreign owned crude or flagged ship, if I'm correct, from going between two U.S. ports. So if you have a ship, doesn't matter where it's from, Greece or Japan or wherever, and it's either owned or flagged or crewed by foreigners in any way, it can't go from New York to Houston. It can't. What it can do is go from New York to some country in the Caribbean and then go to Houston. This is also why you don't have foreign flagged planes flying within the U.S. It's to protect some U.S. infrastructure and businesses and transport. So, for example, if you go on a British Airways flight, you can leave Austin, Texas, and go to London. What you cannot do is take a British Airways plane with a British crew that's actually a British plane and go from Austin to New York to London. That's not permitted either, right? You can leave the country and come back, and that's what the ships do. But
a change of that would have a big change in the airline industry, which would be good for some. I don't know. I just think that
all of this is designed to protect American industry and shipping interests, which I realize the U.S. is not a big owner of shipping, right? But so if you want to go from the Pacific Northwest to Long Beach, you would need to go to Canada first if you're a foreign flagged owned or crewed ship before you could go to Long Beach or LA or anywhere else.
Would you have to completely unload?
I don't believe you'd have to unload, but you would have to moor in another country before you could go between the U.S. ports.
It's just an interesting thing. So we're getting back to the recycled iron and to the mills. How's it going to flow? Then I guess we're going to have to be importing more iron, recycled iron, since we can't, because the rail, look.
Regionally, we may be importing into we might be exporting from some regions and importing into others because of the Jones Act limitations of where the flows go.
All right, so.
And who owns the ships?
Let's talk about housing and office space for a second.
Sure.
We see in San Francisco huge office buildings, relatively new within 10 years. They can't even sell it for $350 a square foot.
Yeah, even in Austin, we overbuilt our office space, and we have massive vacancies in Austin as well. I think you're going to have a lot of people continuing to work remote, especially in a tight labor market. If you want really talented, highly educated office workers, it's the Hunger Games if you're in HR right now. It's like sharpen your elbows, gird your loins. You're trying to hire the best people. It's a tough fight out there, right? And so you have two ways you can increase your ability to recruit. Pay more, let them work remote. And so
what
a lot
happens?
of office space remains vacant
fair
or
enough.
partially vacant.
So what the hell happens to this office space?
Oh, this is a great question. I'm so glad you asked. So we're here in fabulous Las Vegas, and we're at Mandalay Bay, but I'm actually here for a different conference, and I'm at the Fontainebleau.
I went there the other night. Amazing. No.
Amazing hotel. Okay, so the Fontainebleau, I believe they began construction in 2006. It was completed in 2009, and they furnished it. But it was the financial crisis. They knew it was going to sit almost completely empty. It is the biggest hotel in Vegas now, is the Fontainebleau. It's on the Strip.
It's beautiful.
Right, but they stripped, after fully furnishing it, they stripped it out in 2009. Why? They knew it was going to be vacant. They let it sit vacant until they opened it in December of 2023. They let it sit unused. It just sat there for almost 15 years. Now it's a glorious hotel, newest and also the biggest hotel now in Vegas. And this is what I tell people about commercial real estate. This isn't like having a wood house where the wood's going to rot and fall apart and it sat empty for 15 years. This is a giant building, an Ayn Rand dream of glass and steel that is still going to be...
There's some copper and aluminum in there.
Right, and there's copper and aluminum. But it's going to be this huge building that holds value. It's what economists call capital stock. Yeah, it sat empty, partially empty, vacant. Those office buildings are going to sit empty, partially empty for
many years. But who's going to own them? Somebody's probably losing.
They'll change hands and get written down, and banks will find a way to. It's fine. It's not like housing.
Okay, let's talk about housing now.
When we had the housing crisis in the U.S., that's something that affected consumers. In the United States, over 2/3 of the economy is people buying stuff. If your house loses value rapidly, you don't want to buy anything. It caused the great financial crisis. But home prices right now, as we sit here, data out just this week, home prices nationally are up 5.5% year on year according to the New York Fed. And rental vacancies prior to COVID, you'd have to go back to 1985 to find rental vacancies this low. So just to recap, strongest number of payrolls we've ever had in history. We've never had this many people working. 7 million more open jobs than there are people collecting unemployment. The lowest rental vacancies prior to COVID since 1985. And we've got mortgage rates at 7% and no one wants to build anything. So if you have a job, which everybody has, and everybody's making more money than they've ever made, and they want to live somewhere, and that's the big secret. People with jobs making money want to live somewhere. There's nothing to rent, there's nothing to buy, there's nothing being built. So housing's probably pretty safe. Thing most people own worth more than almost anything they own, unless they own a business, is their house. So there's a wealth effect. People are still consuming, but
when does new home construction, at what level of the interest rates, or where does it need to be to start seeing a real expansion there?
I think you need another 150 basis points lower. We're at 7% mortgages now. If we were at 5%, you'd see a lot more construction for housing. But look, we already still have, like I said, over 400,000, almost 500,000 open jobs in construction right now with mortgages at 7%. And all these office buildings, we know they're probably going to sit partially vacant for decades, right? That could happen, just like with the Fontainebleau. 15 years it sat there, did nothing.
I was asking myself when I saw it, what was that? Why all of a sudden it's all lit up now? Well, I don't remember seeing it being built. It's been a long time.
Yeah, it was built in 06 to 09. It's been built for 15 years. But
Restaurant tip, Mother Wolf, real Italian pasta.
Don's Prime, a great steak place. Went there the other night myself.
And Fontainebleau.
And the Fontainebleau. Don's Prime. It's fantastic.
All right.
And it's what it tells us is when you build something that lasts, what economists call capital stock, it'll sit there. It may lose value. It may gain that. Like sooner or later, we're going to use it. What's going to happen in the next 20 years? We're not going to build too many office buildings in the United States.
No.
And in Austin or San Francisco, there's probably enough office buildings because you're going to have a lot more work from home people. We probably have enough for a long time. What we need is more multifamily housing everywhere because everybody's got a job. There's nothing to rent. There's nothing to buy. And that's what construction will do.
So, circling back to all this, we're here at at ISRI, but we're the recycled materials industry, right? So, we talked about steel, copper, aluminum. You kind of gave your set. But project out based on the course that we're on now, barring any powder keg explosion in the Middle East or some other horrific conflict that starts.
I mean, I think...
What are you confident that's going to take place?
Barring any conflict in the Middle East, what does that mean? Does that mean, that it remains stable, but it doesn't get worse, but or it gets worse at the same pace it's been getting worse? You know what I mean? Or does it stop, frozen in time, and... or does it get better, right? So people who are not just economists, people who are futurists, which is something else I do, they talk about four futures.
Okay? Let's hear it.
The four futures are, the first one is called the reversal. The reversal is, we've had this trend of accelerating conflict between the U.S. and China. Cold War II is accelerating. Let's just reverse it. What's the reversal? The reversal is Putin and Xi and Biden and Zelensky and Israel and Hamas sitting around a campfire making s'mores singing Kumbaya. It's a scenario. It's not a likely scenario.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that anytime.
Not seeing that.
Not seeing that. All right, let's give me another one.
So let's say that one doesn't happen.
That's not happening.
The other is called the plateau, which means everything that's been going on just freezes in time right now. Nothing gets worse. Nothing gets better. It just stays. I don't think that's likely. I don't think Russia's going to stay exactly where it is in Ukraine. I don't think China's going to keep exactly the way things are with Taiwan. I don't think Israel and Hamas are going to say exactly the way it is right now. Nothing more is going to happen. So let's check that off the box.
All right.
There's two more.
All right, let's hear it.
One is the continuation, which is things that have been ratcheting up, the tensions between U.S. and China, the trade restrictions, the grinding of the battle lines between Russia and Ukraine, the grinding of Iran's terrorist proxies grinding on Israel. That just continues to grind. It ends in a bad place, but it's a grinding.
Okay.
That's the continuation. It's possible. And then there's the acceleration, the parabolic acceleration, where suddenly something gets screwed up and it all gets massively worse. So, we already said we don't expect the reversal.
No.
We don't expect the plateau.
No.
So we could see the continuation or the acceleration. Both of those are strong for the dollar. They likely pose for higher interest rates. They're strong for gold and potentially other precious metals, especially silver and platinum, less so palladium. They're probably bearish for industrial metals, and they're probably bearish for equity markets, unless you're long defense stocks. And they're going to be a few other things that ripple from that, right? Like interest rates, bond yields go up, and maybe bond prices come down. So you've got those things that could play out if you end up with a continuation or an acceleration. You also are likely to have duplicative bifurcated supply chains. Mexico becomes a winner in the trade war with China. India becomes a big winner in the trade war with China. And you have a bunch of other countries that probably pile on to the conflict. Venezuela, Serbia, a number of other countries join the coalition of the disgruntled that lost Cold War I and pile on into what we've trademarked as Cold War II.
Well, I think we're going to see continuation, but I think
that's a better scenario than the parabolic, let me tell you. And here's hoping that you're right, but things could easily go horribly wrong.
It's real either way. I'm a realist.
It's real either way.
Because the reality is, we're sitting here, we could get up at the end of this podcast, Jason, and the world could be upside down because...
Absolutely. Could happen
if the IDF does a full-blown retaliation against Iran...
Yep. Or even if Israel just retaliates a little bit, Iran has said they'll do a full retaliation.
Yeah. Well,
and right now the debate is, did Iran try its best to hit Israel? And its Western allies are saying yes. Iran tried its best, and it was thwarted. Who was it thwarted by? The attack that Iran made on Israel proper? It was thwarted by a very tense coalition. U.S., U.K., France, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. It took 6 countries in order to prevent, there were a couple minor casualties, there was some damage done, but to stop almost everything took 6 countries. Iran tried its best. What happens if they try again? Iran has said if Israel responds at all, they're going to go in again, go full ham, right?
This is cooler heads. I'm hoping cooler heads prevail. It's like you're in a bar, somebody threw a haymaker, and it didn't even hit your chin. It just hit your collar on your shirt.
Yeah, but Iran wanted it to. Iran wanted it to hurt, and there's news stories out there. They're talking about, even if Israel doesn't do anything, actually, maybe they do want to send 1,500 rockets. Because now there's pressure in Iran that it looks like they didn't try.
And then we wake up and we don't even have an economy. Because nobody knows what the hell.
We would have an economy. It would just be another war. And that would mean much higher oil prices, much higher inflation, Fed rate hikes, stronger dollars, stronger gold, all that other stuff that we might see even if it grinds higher. Iran wants chaos. For Iran, chaos is a ladder. It's a chance for Iran to improve its standing. It's a chance for Iran's allies, Russia and China, North Korea, Hamas, all the terrorist groups that Iran financially supports. It's a chance for the Houthis, all of these entities to benefit. Anything you can do to undercut America, anything you can do to look like America and its allies can't defend themselves or won't defend themselves. You make Israel fight with 2 hands tied behind its back. When's the last time you've even seen a news story about all the military base attacks that Iran's terrorist groups have been enacting on U.S. bases and troops in Syria and Iraq? Those news stories don't even get out there. And that's going on. We know it. You can look at the Institute of Study of War. They produce daily reports on what's going on in Iran and Ukraine. They produce a weekly report on China and Taiwan. These are nonpartisan reports about where the attacks are on U.S. bases, U.S. troops, U.S. ships, and also what's going on in those broader conflicts. It doesn't get a lot of press.
Well,
and so, like, we're just because, I mean, like, look, that's
I think
the
I'm
question.
depressed, Jay.
This is the question, right? Like, Lebanon, you have Lebanese Hezbollah, right? Terrorist group funded by Iran, firing rockets into Israel every day. Should Israel respond if those rockets don't hit anything? Lebanese Hezbollah certainly wants them to hit things. If the U.S., let me ask the question, if the U.S. had rockets being fired across its border at it, would the U.S. respond? Or would we say, well, their rockets are kind of crappy, so they don't hit much. We'll just let them keep firing missiles at us.
Well, we didn't take down a balloon for a long time.
Right? You know,
I don't know. So
these are terrifying questions. So let me ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to put you in the hot seat.
Oh, okay, good.
If the U.S. was attacked, or one of its allies with a nuclear weapon, would we, under the current situation and administration, would we respond?
Current administration, I say no.
Okay, you know who also probably thinks that? Everybody else on planet Earth.
Well,
so this gets to military deterrence. If it looks like we're being cautious to avoid World War III, which is a good thing, but if we project that a little too loudly, a little too often, and it looks like we won't push back, you end up with a pile-on of baddies. And that's what we see with the Cold War band getting back together again. I think they feel we will not respond harshly if attacked. And that's where we end up in the situation we're at, which is why we said the plateau and the reversal seem unlikely, and a continuation or an acceleration do.
Well, Big J,
I wish I had better things to say, John. I'm sorry.
It's fascinating because, you know, you as an economist, but you're a futurist. You know that. I know that. And what's interesting is these type of discussions, you know, we can get in, we can talk about interest, but really the unknown is continuation at what growth, as you say.
Yep.
That,
at what rate does it get worse?
Yeah, and we can see things happen in a positive way. We might be get some of these immigration fixed, get people in the workforce, great. But if this thing starts continuation, maybe at a little accelerated pace, well, hell, who knows now?
Right. Well, that's right. This is the number one thing most CEOs are thinking about, other than workforce. Right. That's probably number one. Right up there is the geopolitics and what happens. Right. Because for Iran, like I said, chaos is a ladder. For them, if they cause trouble, oil prices go up. You know who sells a lot of oil? Iran. You know who also sells a lot of oil? Their buddy Russia. And you're like, well, Russian oil gets sold at a discount. Yeah, but it'll be a discount from a higher price.
Yeah.
So if they make trouble, it actually benefits them, right? And it benefits their buddies. And that's where we have a problem, because there's this perverse incentive for Iran and its terrorist groups to continue to cause trouble, because it makes the one thing they sell, oil, like more valuable, right? I mean, they also sell pistachios, but like, you know, it makes their oil a lot more valuable. I don't think it does anything for the value of pistachios in the open market. I haven't seen that commodity trading contract, but for oil prices, you know, in Iran and Russia, those prices go up. And then it also, everything Iran does in the Middle East distracts from what Russia is doing in Ukraine. I mean, there are countries, Armenia, it's in the Caucasus, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. During the Soviet era, they were part of what the Soviet Union controlled. Armenia is in a military defense alliance with Russia. But now they're trying to seek EU membership because they're afraid Russia will gobble them up. Ukraine, Moldova, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia, these countries are all afraid Russia's going to eat them for lunch. And, you know, where does it stop? So even if those countries don't succeed in gobbling everything they want to gobble, if Venezuela doesn't succeed in gobbling up half of its neighbor Guyana, where there's also a bunch of oil, or if Serbia doesn't make a move on Bosnia and try to gobble half of Sarajevo, which is Srpska, a disputed area, even if none of that happens, let's say some of it happens, all of it undermines the U.S. reliability as an ally. That lowers our standing in the world, and then that helps them.
Helps the bad
and
guys.
that helps China trying to take Taiwan.
Okay, now we're going in. Listen, we're nightmare scenarios.
These aren't nightmares. I haven't even talked about anything nightmare.
All right, well we're going to...
Trust me, this isn't the stuff that keeps me up at night.
I was going to ask you that question, but I don't want to know now.
You do not want to know.
I do not want to know.
We want your audience not to have nightmares tonight.
Well, listen, Jay, fascinating, really, because it's real.
It is real.
What we talked about is real. We have a lot of real things, but there's some real things that can throw everything, what we know economically now, completely out the window, and we'll see things we didn't know we could see.
That's why I dodged your question. I did it in a very fancy way, but you asked me, what's something we know for sure? And the answer is, there's very little we know for sure, except what I say we do know is that that tension between the U.S. and China, the tension between the U.S. and its allies and China and its allies, that's going to increase, which means we get duplicative supply chain, more manufacturing in North America, probably more steel demand and fabrication and industrial base in North America. And if we do end up with another Trump administration, you're probably going to get a lot more industrial stuff in North America. I think those things are probably what's going to happen.
We're going to see. Jason Schenker, thank you so much for scaring the holy hell out of John. Thank you very much. Now, maybe my audience will think this is part of some of my content that is humorous or it's a horror film or whatever, but it's a reality film.
No, we didn't do any voices, right? Like, Lil Wayne's not in the shot. So, like, this is real. I don't joke around. People call me Mr. Happy, ironically. Yeah. As you can probably tell.
But you know what, though? Truth of the matter is, a lot to think about. Great content. Thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, John.
Let's have a great rest of the show. We've got a few more days left here in Vegas.
It's a great show. I think there's a lot of opportunity here in the U.S., and regardless of what happens going forward, I think the U.S. is still one of the best places to be in the entire world.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for another episode of Pile of Scrap with my good friend, Jason Schenker, Futurist, Economist. We'll leave it at that right now. I had a few other choice words. I'm going to leave it at that.
That's fine. We'll leave it there.
All right, brother. Thank you, and thanks for watching.
This has been a Sierra International Machinery original audio series. Thanks for listening. Please share this podcast and make sure to subscribe.